My name is Rashawn Gregg with the City of Austin's Equal Employment Fair Housing. I am Welcome to Fair Chance Information Session for Employers. The purpose for today's meeting is to introduce and provide an overview of the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. Today we will give an overview of why Fair Chance Hiring is important. We will be joined by a representative from the Texas Workforce Solutions Capital Area Business Solution Team to discuss employer incentives. We will talk about what Fair Chance Hiring does not do, Fair Chance Hiring practices, employer coverage, retaliation, enforcement, and provide contact information. Why Fair Chance Hiring is important. When individuals with criminal records have jobs, it increases their tax contributions and saves taxpayer money by reducing the likelihood of a person becoming involved in the criminal justice system. Failing to employ millions of people with criminal records costs America $57 to $65 billion a year in economic gains. Fair Chance Hiring is important to reduce unemployment and recidivism. Employment is the single most important influence on decreasing recidivism. Fair Chance Hiring is important because it increases reintegration of qualified job applicants with a criminal background. It boosts the local economy by removing barriers for the reentry community. Next, we will be joined by Lee Pendleton of the Texas Workforce Solutions.
Hello, I'm Lee Pendleton. I'm the Business Solutions Manager for Workforce Solutions Capital Area. My team and I work with thousands of employers every year, but our job is to get Travis County residents employed. At Workforce Solutions, job seekers of all kinds pass through our doors. Some visit once or twice before finding work. Others are tougher to place because they have barriers to employment. These barriers can be temporary, such as difficulties with transportation, or they can be more complicated, such as a job seeker's status as an ex-offender. Every job seeker who comes in for assistance goes through an assessment, and if they are eligible, we will place them in one of our service programs. Through these programs, they receive job readiness consultation and may even qualify for extensive training in fields as diverse as nursing, IT, or construction. Whether they have background issues or not, we go to great lengths to make sure that the job seekers we are introducing to our employers are going to be a good fit. Now, as I said, my team deals primarily with employers, and Workforce Solutions has services designed for their needs as well. Some of these services include fidelity bonding, subsidized employment, work experience, and the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, all of which offer financial benefits to employers who are willing to train and develop the workforce. Regarding fidelity bonding, Texas Workforce Commission and the Workforce Development Board offer free fidelity bonding services to reduce employers' concerns about hiring at-risk job applicants who cannot be bonded through other sources. This bonding protects the employer against employee acts of dishonesty such as larceny, embezzlement, and theft. Coverage is usually issued in the amount of $5,000. There is no deductible, there are no forms to fill out, and coverage can be activated almost immediately. Workforce Solution Capital Area's Subsidized Employment Work Experience Program is a twist on the familiar on-the-job training model. We place a job seeker from one of our service programs with an employer, but we pay their wages, cover their insurance, and manage other HR duties for up to 12 weeks. The employment may be part-time, less than 30 hours per week, or full-time, up to 40 hours per week. Employers participate by contacting Business Solutions and completing a simple employer agreement. Employers then interview subsidized employment job seeker participants as they would any other applicant, and they decide if a candidate is a good fit. Employers are under zero obligation to retain a subsidized employment participant if they are the wrong fit for their organization. But at the end of the 12 weeks, we'd ideally like to see that employer offer the participant permanent employment. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit is a federal income tax benefit administered by the U.S. Department of Labor for employers who hire individuals from specific target populations, including veterans and ex-offenders. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit reduces a business's federal tax liability, serving as an incentive to select job candidates who may have employment barriers. Tax benefits for employers begin at $2,400, and that's for each job seeker they hire that meets the tax credit criteria. Workforce Solutions does not run this program, but we will assist business owners in downloading, filling out, and filing the forms necessary to receive their tax credits. Rashawn has already listed a number of benefits to hiring ex-offenders, and I think you'll agree these are a few more. Let's keep Austin weird, and let's keep Austin working.
Thank you, Lee. Fair Chance Hiring does not prohibit background checks. Thank you, Lee. What Fair Chance Hiring does not do. Fair Chance Hiring does not prohibit background checks. Employers can still conduct background checks once a conditional employment offer has been made. Fair Chance Hiring does not change employers' hiring standards. The ordinance does not require an employer to hire someone unfit for a particular job. Rather, it increases the competition in the labor market. Fair Chance Hiring does not create a protected class under Title VII. Fair Chance Hiring does not require an employer to implement background checks. Fair Chance Hiring does not require employers to hire felons. Let's talk about what Fair Chance Hiring does cover. Fair Chance Hiring covers job announcements and job postings. Job announcements and job postings may not contain information that states or implies that an individual's criminal history automatically disqualifies them. The ordinance applies equally to internal and external job announcements, applications, and promotional opportunities. Examples of prohibited language: must have clean background check, felons need not apply, this position is subject to a criminal background check, a criminal background check will be conducted. Instead, sample language includes, this position is subject to a background check, only relevant convictions will be considered, and if found, will not automatically disqualify the candidate. Job applications are also covered under the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. Applications must not contain questions about criminal history, including arrest records or convictions. This includes formal and informal applications. Examples of prohibited language on applications include, have you ever been convicted, arrested, or served deferred adjudication? Felons need not apply. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Studies show that this language is a barrier for returning citizens when they are searching for employment. Although they may be qualified, when postings and applications contain these statements or questions, applicants are discouraged from even applying. Removing this language removes a barrier to employment. Fair Chance Hiring does cover job interviews. During an interview, an employer shall not inquire into or consider an applicant's criminal history until after the applicant has received a conditional employment offer. An employer may not take adverse action based on voluntary self-disclosure. An example of self-disclosure is asking an applicant about gaps in employment. If that applicant self-discloses they were incarcerated during those gaps, an employer shall not take adverse action against the applicant. Additionally, an employer may not take adverse action against an applicant if they do not self-disclose. An employer may not employ an individual because the individual did not provide criminal history information prior to a conditional employment offer. A conditional employment offer. What is a conditional employment offer? A conditional employment offer is an oral or written offer by an employer to employ an individual in a job or placement in a staffing pool. That is conditioned solely on the employer's evaluation of the individual's criminal history. Before a conditional offer, the ordinance prohibits inquiries into felony or misdemeanor conviction history, whether the person was on probation, fined, jailed, or parole. This includes inquiries on applications, doing interviews, or independently using the internet or a contracted service. Fair chance hiring practices include individualized assessments. This practice may be the most detailed and may be the most important part, one of the most important parts of the fair chance hiring practices. After the conditional employment offer, the employer may conduct the criminal background check. If an employer is going to withdraw a conditional employment offer, the employer must first conduct an individualized assessment. Policies that ban all people with criminal records may violate the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. The individualized assessment requires an employer to evaluate the following 3 factors about an applicant's criminal history before determining an applicant is unsuitable for a job. The nature and gravity of any offense in the individual's criminal history. Consider the nature of the offense for which the applicant was convicted. This includes things like the harm caused and how serious the crime was. The nature of the offense or conduct may be assessed with reference to the harm caused by the crime. Theft is an example of an offense that causes property loss. For example, offenses identified as misdemeanors may be less severe than those identified as felonies. Consider only convictions that are relevant to the job in question. The second factor is the length of time since the offense and completion of the sentence. Consider only convictions recent enough to indicate a present risk. The risk of recidivism decreases over time. Employer policies typically specify the duration of a criminal conduct exclusion. Permanent exclusions from all employment based on any and all offenses are not consistent with business necessity. There is a time at which a former offender is no longer any more likely to reoffend than the average person. Employers should set a cutoff time that reflects available evidence. One study found that the risk of repeat offending is negligible after 3, 5, or 7 years, depending on the offense. Is the conviction recent enough to indicate a present risk? Number 3, the nature and duties of the job for which the individual has applied. Consider the nature of the job held or being sought, including the nature of the duties, the job's essential and most important functions, and the circumstances under which the job will be performed, including the level of supervision, oversight, and the amount of agency or independence the employee has, and the environment in which the job duties are performed, including is this job going to be performed outside? Will it be in a warehouse or in a private home? All of which are important factors. Consider only convictions that are relevant to the job in question. Employers should identify the risks presented by the job and screen for convictions related to those risks. For example, screening chief financial officers for embezzlement or other theft convictions, drivers for DUIs or DWIs, IT security positions for identity theft make a great deal of business sense. The connection between certain jobs and risks may be obvious, but other times will require judgment calls. In 2012, the EEOC provided guidance on this subject. For more information, please visit their website at www.eeoc.gov. Adverse action is the refusal to hire or refusal to promote or the revocation of an offer of employment or promotion. Adverse action based on voluntary self-disclosure is prohibited. Adverse action based on pre-existing information is prohibited. For example, imagine a large multi-state employer. An applicant walks into the employer's Georgia store and applies for employment. The Georgia store conducts a criminal background check, and it is discovered that the applicant has a criminal history. The data is then stored into the company-wide database. When the same applicant moves to Austin and applies for the same employer, the Austin location can access the database and the Georgia criminal history information. The Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance prohibits the Austin location from considering this information before making a conditional employment offer. Additionally, the Fair Chance Hiring prohibits taking adverse action against information discovered through media outlets. Notice of adverse action. An employer must notify an applicant in writing of adverse action based on criminal history. The Fair Chance Hiring does not require employers to give the applicant a copy of the criminal history or the individualized assessment. It is important to note that although an employer is not required to give the applicant a copy of the background information or the assessment, with all compliance requirements, it is important to maintain accurate documentation. Staffing agencies. The Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance contains a provision that only applies to staffing agencies. Staffing agencies may solicit criminal information and perform an individualized assessment only after extending a conditional employment offer for a job to which the individual will be employed or placed in a staffing pool. Employers covered by the ordinance. Private employers with 15 or more employees. Those 15 or more employees include at will, casual contract workers. This is a major difference between the ordinance versus state and local discrimination laws, which do not count contractors. Full-time, part-time, temporary, and seasonal workers are covered by the ordinance. Workers employed by temporary agencies and workers participating in a vocational apprenticeship or educational training program are covered under the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. Employers whose primary work locations are located in Austin, employing persons for each working day in each of 20 or more calendar weeks in the current or preceding calendar year are covered by the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. The location of the employer's headquarters is not relevant. The location of the employer's customer is not relevant. Employer coverage. Employer coverage exemptions. Even if an organization meets all the coverage requirements of the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance, it may qualify for an exemption from the ordinance. Exempt employers include police, fire, and emergency management, federal, state, and local government entities, political subdivisions, 501c private membership clubs, the state of Texas, agencies of the state of Texas, and the state of Texas institutions of higher learning. Job exemptions. Positions that require background checks are, job exemptions. We've talked about employer coverage. We've talked about exempted employers. We're going to go back to our covered employers, because although an employer may be covered by the ordinance, they may have positions that are not covered under the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. Positions that require background checks as indicated by state or federal law, legally mandated by insurance or bond requirements, may disqualify an individual based on a criminal history, are exempt from the ordinance. Retaliation, adverse action, retaliation and adverse action. An employer may not take adverse action against an individual who reports a Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance violation or participates in a Fair Chance Hiring complaint. The Equal Employment Fair Housing Office oversees the enforcement of the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance, including subpoena authority. A Fair Chance Hiring complaint must be filed within 90 calendar days after the individual learning of the violation, or no later than 1 year of the alleged violation. Upon determination of a violation, the Equal Employment Fair Housing Office will send a 10-day notice to the employer. Failure to cease violation could result in a penalty up to $500. First-time violators can avoid the penalty by attending a compliance session. The City of Austin's Equal Employment and Fair Housing Office is located at 1050 East 11th Street. For additional information, you may call us at 512-972-FAIR or 512-972-3247. Thank you for participating in this information session.